Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Finstep Asia Edge podcast, bringing you the best of Web3, Fintech, and startups in Asia, in particular from our home base in Hong Kong. Today with me is Tayseer, who is the CEO and founder of TforDesigns and Media. T4 does a lot of interesting work in the innovation and design space, and he has also been supporting Finstep Asia with another initiative that we'll talk about as we go through. Tayseer, welcome to the Finstep Asia Edge podcast. How are you doing today?
I am very good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And it's been very good working with you over the last few months, probably now, and also getting to know what you do otherwise. As with me, you've come to Hong Kong a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we can start with the conversation about how did you become an entrepreneur, right? What drove you or what attracted you to become an entrepreneur? And if you want to talk a little bit about your roots and then how that process came about, it would be lovely for our audience to understand that journey towards entrepreneurship.
Okay, so for me, my personal story at least, it's been sort of an accident, to be honest, to get into entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So this was back in my college years, decade plus ago, and I was trying to do like advanced courses in mechanical engineering. So I was an undergraduate, I was doing master's classes, and I was like the geek type of person that all professors would
all of the
invite
engineers
me.
are geeks.
Yeah. But then eventually I was being rejected of certain classes because of my sponsorships and all that stuff.
Okay.
And so I ended up seeing those classes that were called product engineering, product entrepreneurship, something. And then I was like, okay, I have nothing to do, might as well just do that.
Okay.
And then I did 1 year of that, and I started thinking, you know what, maybe I should not do those advanced engineering courses anymore. Instead, I should focus on entrepreneurship and starting things on my own. And that was it. That was my first experience, and that's how I got into it a decade plus ago, and I continued opening new projects all the time.
So it's not that common for people to step right out of their, education, university as it were, and jump into entrepreneurship. It happens, but it's rare. So was this something that you're familiar with people in your family in entrepreneurship, or people in your circles in entrepreneurship that made you say, hey, I want to start something of your own? Or how was that initial days of setting up a company, getting to understand business, all of this?
To be honest, just to clarify, when I finished college, I didn't go full-time entrepreneur.
Okay.
Usually I don't advise people to do that either.
Okay, fair.
So I was doing a full-time job.
Okay.
And at the same time, I would spend my evenings, my weekends, just trying out to start all sorts of random stuff. So I started TforDesign as a freelance brand at that time. That grew into becoming what it is today. But I also started many other things that ended up just either failing or closing or just disappearing over time.
Okay.
It took me 6 years after that before I went full-time on my own.
So I think that's a good conversational segue in some senses. Quite a few people like to have a job and then work on the side or after work hours in terms of building their own project, let's put it that way, and then starting to look at the business. So how was that experience for 6 years, and what was like the trigger point for you to say, okay, enough of doing this on the side, I want this to be my main source of income and my desire and drive, right?
So my trigger, I would say, was, first of all, so TforDesign started to generate money on its own. It was not livable income, but it was something. And then, of course, from my full-time job, I was able to save a good amount of money to help me survive for a good period of time to the future. So putting those together that sense of financial security that I had in my savings, and the sense that TforDesign is starting to generate at least a little bit of something,
Sure.
were two of the main triggers that made me take the jump. In addition, of course, I wanted to get deeper into the field of innovation and design, and with that was kind of what brought me to Hong Kong at the time. So I quit my job, I came to Hong Kong, and I did my master's degree in design specifically.
Nice.
And I started growing TforDesign at the same time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And so how was that experience? Like, why did you choose Hong Kong over all other places where you could go for innovation and design circa 2018, 17, right?
Yeah. Hong Kong is pretty good. I would consider Hong Kong to be a good place for design and innovation. It's also in Asia.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to the West, to be honest, because I did my undergraduate over there, so I wanted to go somewhere different.
Sure.
So Asia was the place I wanted to be, and of Asia, Hong Kong is probably, I'm not sure if I can say the top choice, but it was my top choice.
My top choice as well, so there you go. Okay. And how was that experience coming in from another country into Hong Kong? Language-wise, this is a likely thing, but how was that early experience of doing your master's and running a business full-time in a new market in some senses? Did you carry over your clients, or did you have to start afresh?
No, I did not have to start afresh. That was the good part.
Okay.
Most of my clients were online.
Okay.
Because we used to work with international publishers,
Mm-hmm.
so the client base didn't really matter much.
Okay.
So I came to Hong Kong mainly to gain the knowledge and the skills and to be part of the bigger design and innovation community. But yeah, living in Hong Kong, to be honest, is quite easy. It's very convenient. Things are easy to get. Housing was a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
Very shocking for me to come here and see the small places with the high cost. But other than that, I've enjoyed Hong Kong. I love Hong Kong, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to the club, being part of the club. And so now when you were building your company out as a full-time entrepreneur, what were, if you had to think about it, like when I started as well, it was like I was part of the Fintech Association, then I jumped into setting up my own company. As with you, I'm the only founder. I mean, I've worked with a few people supporting me in different initiatives, but when you take that plunge to run your own thing, it's almost a very different world,
It is,
right?
yeah.
So what are your experiences switching over, and what were the three key challenges you kind of faced in your initial year or so of setting up the company, if any, right?
So for me, I had like a very small sort of transition, because I was kind of doing TforDesign every evening, every weekend. And so when I transitioned, it was just like taking that to the daytime instead of the evening time. So that was easy in that part. Of course, one of the big things I had to think about was finances.
Sure.
The job, every beginning of the month or every end of the month, you get a chunk of money and you move on with your life, and that's about it.
Yeah.
When you're on your own, that's kind of different. That chunk of money gets variable. Sometimes it gets on the gray zone. Sometimes you miss something and then that payment goes away for 1 month or so. So that's it takes some time to get used to how you think about money and how you manage money.
Cash flow, essentially. Right?
Cash flow, essentially, both for survival of the business, but also survival of you as an individual in terms of your own financial security, which ultimately will impact your mental health, will impact your physical health, will impact everything. So that was like probably the biggest switch I had to take in terms of thinking. But in terms of work, luckily for me, it was quite smooth.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key elements, right? Cash flow, which people don't realize is it's, as you said, if you have a fixed salary, it's when it's coming. You have you plan your budget planning is very different. Whereas you start getting a different lifestyle almost when you start working, right? You cut down on number of things. Your cash flow is not as steady. I mean, hopefully that's where you want to reach, but in the initial elements, and a lot of people think it's very rosy as an entrepreneur, but there could be cases where you've done work and then the client isn't paying and you chase and you may not get that money as well. It's just like time spent, work, effort, etc. And yeah, for me, one of the challenges that happened was COVID, right?
COVID, okay.
Yeah, we were looking at switching from being to running an accelerator, which is more physical conversation cross border, which involved travel between multiple countries, and then bang, right? COVID hit, right? So you're coming up to the 5th year in some senses of when COVID started. So for you, it is a similar timeline, right? For like after a year or so of having set up the company, probably just finished your masters, right? And COVID hit. Now, how did COVID impact your business? Because there have been two sides to it. One is both positive for a lot of people, and for some it has been a challenge, and you need to pivot. But what was your experience?
It was tough, COVID. During the time of COVID, we had two things, at least in our business, we had two things going on. One was an area where we were strongly pushing the physical space of things.
Okay.
So we were going to university, we were doing design workshops, we were building connections to do design innovation consultancy and so on. We were building this network of partnerships in Hong Kong and in mainland China. And then, even before we were able to get any returns on that work, COVID hits.
Yeah.
And then when COVID hits, of course, all the companies were kind of downgrading or decreasing their budgets for projects like that, consultancy projects, workshops, anything physical education was just gone.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, people movements were difficult. It was very difficult for people in mainland in our network to interact with people in Hong Kong. And so that was a big hit on that new baby we were trying to grow. It basically killed that baby in its infancy, which was kind of sad because that was like 6 months of full-time work just gone. Not just me, but me and also some of the partners I had at the time.
Yeah.
So that was one part of it. Another part of it was that we were actually good in online education. We published our first online course in 2015, which was very early in the game. And so when COVID hit, that kind of went up in ways that were, it was big. Like the online stuff started going up notably, I would say. So that kind of balanced things out a little bit. We were like, okay, and I think we still can survive with that return that was given to us from COVID. So that was the COVID experience from the
startup
side. Yeah,
I had the same experience in the sense that we had a certain plan, we had partners in person, put in fees, and then just had to basically cancel it, and then look at different, so pivoting. In your case, you had another product line or a service line which now zoomed in, right? So two parts to this next question. Part one is when you saw this alternative, not I would say alternative, but or the unexpected necessarily growth in this sector versus what you were core focus on in-person workshops. How did you kind of pivot or change your focus, and how did you handle the scaling of that, if you did, right? Because you're going to see that. And there wasn't, and especially in 2020 and early 2021, they didn't seem like you knew when this is going to end, right? It was like maybe 6 months, maybe 3 months, don't know. But in 2021, late 2021, early 2022, you kind of started seeing the end goal because other countries had started moving on. But the early parts, this is where you were, and digital was everything. How did you then pivot? How did you scale your teams if you did? What was that from a business owner's perspective that changed your focus? How did you reach that or drive that? Yeah.
I mean, we were overworked to some extent for the online stuff.
Sure.
Mainly because for our courses, when we offer a course, we also offer learner support to it, right? So if a person have a question, they ask us and we answer. And during that time, we had, you could get like 10 questions, 20 questions per day, which is a lot, especially for some of the technical courses we have, because every question you had to research and you had to investigate and you had to do all that sort of stuff.
So how big was your team
at that time? We had a lot of interns. I recruited a lot of interns to because I thought it might be temporary. So we were overworked, me and my teaching assistant, but we also had 2 other technical interns at the time, plus 2 other marketing graphics interns. So total we were 8 total, including my own people.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how we.
So start having more questions to answer.
And then we also tried to push forward because we thought, okay, maybe we should invest more in online education instead. And so prior to that, we used to partner with other platforms. So we were partnering, for example, with Internshallah in India. We have open platforms like Udemy, Skillshare, and all that. But at that time, we also invested to start our own platform. So now we have the TforDesign platform as well to host our design courses. Then become like our own little platform that we do our mailing list and do our prospects and all that, or manage our leads and all that stuff.
And this change in platform from using a third party, which is using the term very loosely asset light, as it were, to then owning your own platform, right? What were some of the changes you saw in revenue or in interaction? Was it a significant change in were the costs similar and it's more of you could manage uploads, etc., versus places like Udemy or Internshallah? Because also your traffic for your customers is now changed, right? Now you're directing, it's coming directly to your platform, I would imagine, versus a bigger marketplace where people are going. So it's a pull versus push kind of strategy. So how did you manage that change or drive your marketing and everything else?
To be honest, we maintain both still.
Okay.
So we still work with third parties and we still have our own platform. To be honest, I still haven't figured the best solution to manage or to how to direct people or how to balance between them. But usually one of the things I found out, at least in my case, is that if somebody goes a customer for a third party is a customer for a third party, it's very hard for me to go to that customer and be like, hey, come to my platform.
Of course,
So I just leave them there. So okay, if you're a customer of that third party, we're also there. We're there to serve you. But if you're looking for, let's say, more customized services, more support, more one-on-one, a little bit more content, then if we have our own platform as well. When we started, we had this mentality that, okay, it's either or, but now over time we decided not to go with that anymore. So it's for the customer with this or this, you can pick, we're here or we're there.
It's also a strategy. It's at times entrepreneurs look at things and want to choose one over other, but you could be running both, right? It's this conversation that people often have about multi-brand outlets, right? Like Giga Sports or JD Sports versus a Nike or Adidas's own showrooms, right? And so in a similar way, it's like a marketplace. You're there, you're getting your own thing, but you also have your own store. Quote unquote online, but that's what it is.
True.
And quite often people think, no, if you're out there's competition, you may not do so well, so may as well be, but they're different drivers, right? Some people want to go and shop, and they want their options, where some people have a more specific need and so they just come back to the same Nike showroom if you're a fan, or I'm using Nike, but it could be anything.
Sure.
Right. Okay. And so building on that, right? So when COVID started going away, let's put it that way, it's not gone away, but things started normalizing. How did you change your business strategy and approach? Because driving things online purely online, it's probably a very different way of approaching target business and driving business, and then going back to hybrid, more largely in person but also online. Or did you? I think maybe I'm going ahead. I'm saying, did you actually move back to more in person service offerings, or you felt that what was going on online was going to continue to be your driver? So I think maybe that's the first question that we can say.
Initially, yes, we continued going online. To be honest, the demand for online stuff is, even though it went down with the recovery of COVID, or like with COVID disappearing out of the being on the main stage, it is still more so than before COVID. So it went up, it went down, but then now it's stable. It's still more than before COVID.
Okay.
So we're still pushing on that. We've had good partnerships with Starweaver, in addition to what we have with CyberU. And now we have courses published in platforms like Coursera as well, on the online side. But we're also trying to do offline as well. To be honest, we're kind of restarting very into that. So we delivered workshops in Saudi last month. Hopefully we'll be delivering, I cannot disclose much about the future, but we'll have more workshops coming up, focusing on design innovation leadership, design thinking, system thinking, and topics of innovation management. So yeah, we're still doing online, still pushing a lot of online, but also we're doing offline as well. And then to do more offline, to be honest, sometimes we start new businesses. We started Tayseer, we started Rabita internship, we started all this stuff. Just so we're like, okay, if we're restarting offline, might as well do something, diversify the portfolio at the same time now.
So from a revenue growth perspective, right? How have you managed that when this is going online versus offline? Because the cost change from online to offline, and online can be more commoditized to some extent, whereas offline there's a lot more hands-on expectation, investment in all of these venues, all these come into picture, right? Even if you're going to a client's place, maybe not, but otherwise if you're hosting yourself workshops, then you have a more dynamic pricing, as it were. So how do you see that change, or how are you managing that?
In terms of
like revenue versus cost, right? Now when the cost variation kicks in, your ratio changes, right? So how would you approach balancing your existing revenue cost ratio versus virtual? Is it because are you changing your pricing to in person to manage and maintain the same ratio, or are you looking to scale in terms of volumes to manage that revenue?
So for at least the way we design our own online stuff, it's quite digitalized, it's quite automated as well. So we invest a lot in automation as well. And so for me, every time we set up something online, there's a big initial cost to it, but then after that, it's just flats out because it's automated for a big part of it, and then we still have the cost of the teaching assistantship. And then the offline is usually more higher chunks of money coming in all at once. What I do is, if something comes from offline, I kind of reinvest it to build more online infrastructure. And so then that online infrastructure becomes auto-running, generating money, almost sort of things, which gives me more time to then go investigate more partnership or offline, or investigate more business opportunities. So that's how I run things eventually. I'm not the best in running finance stuff, to be honest, so don't take my advice for any of that. It's just how I do things at the moment.
It's being an entrepreneur, right? Like it's different experiences and different focuses. Now, coming to the innovation conversation, where you're doing design thinking, you're doing leadership, innovation leadership, broader move towards innovation. How have you seen that evolve in the last 5 years in terms of your clients or your target clients, how they were looking at innovation and design thinking, etc., 5 years ago to now? And I'm assuming most of your conversations would have been with decision makers or CX or C-level executives, right, when you're driving this.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen a significant change in how they're approaching this, or is it still the same? Or what's motivating them to engage people to drive this?
I mean, there is awareness that like changing the status quo within an organization is important.
Yeah.
There is a big awareness that innovation is important.
Yeah.
And now more recently than ever, there is more awareness about that, okay, innovation has methodologies and has approaches and school of thoughts and tools and all that stuff that people can be engaged in to drive innovation forward. So that's in one side. And sometimes that translates to them sponsoring people to do courses in design thinking, innovation leadership, and all that stuff. In practice, however, it's difficult. I have to give them that from their perspective.
Yeah.
The pressure of innovation is like people understand the value of innovation. However, innovation requires resources input, right?
Yeah.
And then resources inputted into innovation. If we look at the knowledge funnel, for example, there are no KPIs, right? Like KPIs can be a bit in the gray side.
Yeah.
Guarantees are in the gray side too. And so then it becomes a very big, even though there's awareness, it's still a very big decision to make that a lot of people I don't want to say anything negative or anything, but I would just say it's there is awareness, there is some sort of a drive, but sometimes you think, okay, there can be more done.
I mean, fair, right? So one of the experiences that I have seen in say the fintech financial services world, less so Web3 because Web3 is as innovative as it is. But when in say 2015 to 2018, 19, when driving fintech ecosystem build here, you're talking to senior people, CTOs. Now you have chief digital officers. At that time wasn't that common actually to have chief digital officers. So you would have this head of innovation, which is a figurehead, but largely just to engage with people, but not really having any buy-in internally because people are like, what is the return on this?
Yeah.
Right? What's my what's the KPI that you're going to get out if I put money in? So whenever there was a tough time for the financial institution, the innovation head was the first to go.
Sure.
Kind of, right? Because it was felt as an add-on auxiliary role rather than something that's definitive. But now you have this whole large innovation teams. Previously it was outsourced to a large extent where innovation projects were being led by consultants or companies versus now having in-house innovation teams, in entrepreneurs, etc. But it is still that conversation of how can we quantify it,
Sure.
right, to drive more growth or focus on skills building, right? Essentially, that's it's. I feel sometimes things like design thinking and innovation planning and leadership are tougher skills than say manual, hard skills like coding, etc. Because there's a significant element of change of mind, and there's a lot of technicalities in innovation. Design thinking in particular, you do have your rules and principles and processes, but there's also mental change that is required to approach.
Sure.
Right. So how would you say that can be achieved, or what are the challenges you've seen people face when trying to move towards from a regular 9 to 6, very methodical, and restricted job description to coming into innovation and design thinking, which by definition needs to have some sort of out-of-box element to it, right? And not quantifiable. So how have you seen that evolve, and what would your recommendations be for people who are making this transition or looking to make this transition?
Okay, so it's not an easy journey, to be honest. However, the first thing I always tell people is like a good innovator is a first level noticer.
Okay.
And so I always tell people, you walk around your day, you just see things, and you start questioning everything you see, right? You see a kid struggling to order food from a traditional restaurant, then people just go on their life. You notice that, you're like, maybe it can be better. You see a process happening in your company or something happening to your client. Everybody thinks it's normal, but you look at it like, oh, maybe it can be different, or maybe it can be better. So the first skill, I'd say, is being a noticer. There's also there's a big mindset shift on that, being that you don't really need solutions to identify problems, right?
Okay.
I see a lot, especially in big corporates, that some people would be like, unless you have a solution, don't bring up the problem, right?
Come to the solution, not the problem.
But that's from an innovation perspective, actually it's not a good way to go about it.
Okay.
The people who bring the problem should be your best friends, because that's what you want the problems. And then you go through the innovation journey to figure out a solution to it. So my first advice would be, or my first recommendation would be a noticer.
Sure.
Encourage, especially if you're a leader, encourage people to bring out problems to you without an expectation of a solution. And then over time you can take those problems, prioritize them, and then put up some resources to address them.
Interesting. How do you prioritize though? So one, you talk about culture that innovation leaders need to do, which is encouraging people to find problems. Now on the other side of it, or the next stage of it rather, on solving it, right? So when you have to solve this, how does an innovation leader encourage their team? What would be the approach you would suggest to find the right ways and approaches to solving things and prioritizing your problems?
So there's no one size fits all, to be honest, in terms of innovation approaches or tools or anything of that sort. However, one of the techniques, I'm just going to tell you one of the techniques I do in my own business is when people bring up problems, and I list every problem they bring in like our actual planner, in like under a brainstorming bucket, and then over time you always get people with some extra time. Sometimes you can push people to have more time toward something extra, and that's when you go through this bucket. You can figure out your own method to do it. You either prioritize it yourself, or you have team discussion to be like, okay, here are a list of things that we can do, and then figure out a way to prioritize them and then assign them to people. As long as there is behind every innovation, there is intention. So that intention is very, very important, whichever form it takes. An intention usually comes with resource allocation to some extent. So sometimes you can afford a little bit of time for an employee to do it, or a little bit of time on yourself to address that. And a lot of times the first steps in addressing it is just research, right? You look at the problem, be like, okay, what's up there, what's behind it, what's causing it, what's that, and what's this.
And so on one hand you have innovation solving problems. I would also say there's instances in innovation where you're trying to improve on things. Right, so you're taking it to the next level, like not the iPhone 16, as people would say, wasn't really innovative enough to move up from 15 to 16, but jokes aside, like when you're trying to move up, what's that approach? How do you kind of identify the need to do that?
So there is there are two ways two areas I look at it. So now we're moving from like solving problems to identifying opportunities. Language-wise, some people would tell you it's the same thing eventually, but a lot of times it's easier to separate them, which I find when communicating with people. So with identifying opportunities, there is the approach of looking into existing technology or existing drivers. So sometimes you just look at technological and social trends that are going up, and then you ask the question, okay, how can we as a business capitalize on those trends going up? If there's a new technology, there's Web3, or there is blockchain, or there is AI, then how can we do that? And then we go into a research journey to figure out human needs and all that stuff to identify those problems. So that's a bit more structure. Sometimes it's more easier to follow. Sometimes you go into, if you have extra resources, you go into like a mystery area. So the knowledge I like to use the notion of a knowledge funnel to explain innovation. So you have mystery at the beginning, heuristics, and then algorithm. So in the mystery phase, you have a vast area of opportunities that were uncovered. We don't know about them, we don't know they exist, they're just there and they're just hidden. And so sometimes you just have people researching stuff, observing all that stuff in that mystery area to identify that, okay, maybe we can investigate a specific area of innovation. So that sometimes helps you identify breakthrough innovations within a business. Those are my two approaches in terms of identifying opportunities rather than solving very visible problems.
And so this is one element where sometimes there's an expectation for everybody to be innovative in the team. But in reality, not everybody has the same mindset, approach, skills, etc. to go towards this journey. So from an innovation leader perspective, how do you identify the right talent among your existing talent to be able to drive innovation? Especially, I feel it could be challenging in environments where there's a very strict hierarchical order and people don't necessarily speak up, and in a work environment, because that's the culture in certain countries, right? So how does an innovation leader try to, without being disruptive or trying to break a local culture hierarchy, but how are they able to identify the right talent for innovation? I know it's not the easiest of things to do, but what would be the ways they could approach that?
I mean, that's a tough situation to be in. But first of all, I'll take it a step back to mention that innovation is different than creativity to some extent. And so for me, what I believe is that innovation is really about hard work. It's not like hard work is more important than being smart or creative or whatever. And I think a lot of people if an organization is surviving, it means they have a lot of hardworking people, right?
So
that's the first thing I always tell people, that as long as you have intention, you tackle something heads on, and you have hardworking people, then you can actually get innovation. In some innovation approaches, of course, you might want to solicit certain individuals that you identify within an organization to be more creative, let's say, in terms of ideation or in terms of connecting different random dots or connecting the unconnected. So if you can identify those, you can solicit them to participate. If not, I don't think people should worry too much, because again, hard work is more important than talent when it comes to innovation.
So I guess what we're basically breaking it into is, one is innovative in terms of creativity of identifying problems and saying, okay, this is one way to approach it. And the second piece, which is in a lot of cases a lot more important, is the execution, right? That's where the hard work and effort comes in. It's structured, you know what you need to do, etc. And that's also a very important part, and not just the creatives, as it were, who may not have the same approach to a structured approach to implementation. That's the balance that you talk about.
Not really. So implementation comes after, and innovation is tested and verified. So that's usually, for most organizations, that's the easiest bit, because especially most bigger organizations are very structured around implementation. And they excel at that. So it's the beginning part in which you navigate this uncertain area.
Sure.
And even with that navigation of uncertainty, usually people solve problems because they stay with them long enough, more so than they're smarter.
Fair.
So if the resources are there, if the workers are there to focus on, let's say, research, focus on prototyping, focus on all those stuff, usually you can end up with very, very, very good results. That's before the implementation, of course. Once the implementation happens, then you probably have your own processes as a company to take on that.
Okay, fair. So, in terms of innovation and going forward, as you mentioned, as a company, you keep looking at different elements, and one of the main reasons we connected was your project Rabita, right? Would love to hear from you on how that came about and what it is, like, for the audience to get a sense.
Okay, so Rabita is basically a small project that help connect startups with internships opportunities, or help connect interns with startup internship opportunities. And focusing on those two types of things, because one, I try to consider myself as a startup as well.
Sure.
And working within a startup is very, very different than working within an established organization,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Especially for an internship, right? If you work for a bigger company as an intern, you have much more structure. You probably have a dedicated personnel to take you in. You have probably big groups of people coming in, like 20, just moving around. If you're working with a startup as an intern, it's much more uncertain. Not because the people working in the startups don't care, but very likely because they themselves live in that uncertain world. So it's like the founders themselves are like, we don't know what we're doing, right? We're figuring out how to do it. So it becomes a really different environment in terms of expectations, in terms of the type of work you do, in terms of the growth you get out of it, basically in terms of everything, right? And so it becomes really important, or one of the problems we've identified in the market was, again, this is for me just talking with startup founders and all that, is that it's kind of difficult to find interns that
good interns
that I would say most interns are good interns, but it's about expectation alignment more so.
Okay.
So it's kind of hard to find interns with the same expectation that startups have to work within that environment. And so we thought, okay, maybe we should provide a place in which, over time, at least in the long run, the long-term vision would be a place that an intern looking for a startup experience would come because of the startup experience.
Okay.
And then startups will come as well because they can get interns with more aligned expectation in terms of working within a startup. So that's how Rabita started. We're still in a very early phase. We're doing it as a service for now.
Yeah.
So we approach every client like yourself. We approach interns and we try to figure out a match. But hopefully in the long run, we can grow into a platform or something.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think, as you rightly mentioned, there are different structures almost to how, when you go into a large organization, they have a structured intern program. There's like tasks are all there. In startups, if you're a technical, person coming in, like, a software engineering intern or something specific, then you are doing more technical work. But even then, in a lot of cases, there's a lot more that you maybe end up doing than just the specific target niche role if you're in more business roles, right? And that also helps in terms of understanding more, as you get exposed to more things in a short period of time than you would in a structured organization, because they've grown into various verticals, and that's how they run, right? So that's how I felt when I did intern as well, that okay, you're getting a lot more, to see a lot more and experience a lot more, and not necessarily the pressures, but the work approaches are very different.
Yeah,
and priorities may switch sometimes even from a day to another day.
Sure.
Just depending on what came up and what demand as you.
Mm-hmm.
We're working this project, okay, let's pause, let's go to something else, because that's kind of what is urgent now, or what clients come in with some request. So you fall into that category as such.
Yeah, and that's the competitive advantage of a startup, right? They can pivot very, very quickly. And so an intern will end up experiencing that.
Yeah.
Just like the people working in the startup as well. I do basically everything from writing emails to putting graphics to cleaning, the office.
Yeah.
And usually interns will also end up doing the same thing.
Correct, yeah. All of those. So what's TforDesigns future next 2-3 years? What are you looking at? What can we expect from you guys?
So hopefully we would be we still do online, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'd be able to build or become a platform more specialized in design leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So far we have a lot of design hard skills in design,
Sure.
3D modeling and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we're moving on to innovation leadership. So hopefully in 3 years we'll have an established platform just
Sure.
specifically for that builds partnerships and have a good network only on that field. Hopefully we'll be in other places of the world as well as a physical structure, not just in Hong Kong. Middle East is a promising place.
Yeah, I was going to come to that.
Yeah.
You're from Saudi originally.
Mm-hmm.
How do you? And there's been a lot of conversation and initiatives also to be fair, bridging mainland China, Greater China, Hong Kong as part of that, with the Middle East, in particular with the UAE and Saudi.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What has been your experience with that? Are you seeing that? Are you hearing more from your friends in Saudi Arabia talking about China and Hong Kong, mainland China and Hong Kong, or is it more direction from here into the Middle East?
No, I mean there are big talks.
Yeah.
I think the presence of Chinese enterprises became very, very common in Saudi right now.
Okay.
I mean, even infrastructure sometimes. Like now you go to the airport in Riyadh and all the signs are written in Chinese as well, in addition to English and Arabic, which did not exist a few years ago. So there is a push, there is more integration, which is good.
Yeah.
That you can see on the ground over there. You can also see here. I see a lot of conferences in Hong Kong talking about the Saudi market and all that stuff. So there is an alignment or like a more collaborative environment that is popping up. I still don't know how to capitalize on that.
Okay.
I've been lucky to get invitations to deliver design and innovation workshops in Saudi and that part of the world. Hopefully that will continue happening as the region is continue to grow or continue to realize the importance of innovation as a structure of methodologies. I hope I can be part of that as well.
Sure. Are there any tips or minders, as it were, that you would give Hong Kong and mainland Chinese entrepreneurs, businesses, when they're going into Saudi and the Middle East? Because culturally very different worlds. Like having worked in Dubai myself for a year and a half with a regulator, but broadly, yes, Dubai is 50-60% South Asians probably, so very familiar culturally, but it's still very, very different work environment and expectations, etc. What would be like top 2-3 things you would tell people who are going in from here into Middle East and to be aware of, which is different to what happens around here in terms of experience, right? So it could be helpful for them as they approach these new markets. Yeah.
Connections are important, but that's common ground with everything. I think culturally, being humble is very, very important.
Okay.
When a new market, I've heard stories as well, that sometimes a new market opens up and they have like huge investments in the market. people would look at that market as an easy catch. Like, okay, we'll just go there and then do big business and then come back in. But that's not really how it works, right?
Sure.
So if you go to Saudi, be humble and focus on the value you are providing to the culture, to the people, and so on. And that's pretty much it. I think Saudi is a friendly country, and people are very friendly, very hospitable. Arrogance doesn't play well. I would say that's pretty much it. Yeah.
That's a fair comment to be made. Like, I think almost when Chinese entrepreneurs are heading over to the Middle East, it's almost you look back 15, 20 years ago when you had certain instances, and these are documented case studies of foreign enterprises coming in who were like, this is how we ran it back home and this is how we're going to run it here as well. The cultural sensitivity is a classic case was supermarkets. Like, some of the supermarkets who came in did not realize that in the Chinese and broadly East Asian cultures, fresh food is very, very important, almost live, right? Like live seafood is sold in the markets versus frozen or day old or whatever. And that's not just with seafood, it's the same thing with vegetables and all of this, which made it a very different environment, and supply chains, etc., start changing. Right? And also, this is how we offer, these are our margins, this is how we work with partners. You come to us versus we go to them, which can be very different. And so I would say that was the lesson that the West learned when entering mainland China. It's a similar thing to keep in mind for Chinese companies when going in to the Middle East broadly, because it's a similar element of, it's not the same as what happens necessarily in mainland. Is going to be slightly different culturally, etc. And I do see a lot of people I've seen visiting Middle East from Hong Kong, from mainland, being very curious. Obviously, there are the Silk Road connections that go centuries or millennia back, so which is a good thing, but broadly also just curious to understand the culture, the food, work experience, all of that, right? So which I think is positive signs for both sides.
Yeah, true. And to be honest, being curious plays very can take you a very long way. I mean, understanding the place you're going to before doing business is really important. And if you're there and you start building connections, then you just go to Saudi food and do Saudi cultural stuff. People just get very happy to see you engage with them. And then with that you have better connections, and with that you have better business as well.
Yeah, I agree. And also I think that's one of the things you mentioned about that people-to-people conversation, right? Having the curiosity to ask questions in a respectful way, right? And then say, why the hell is this happening? It's rather like try understanding how it is. People are very accommodating, very helpful, and in the Middle East in particular, globally maybe, but it's people love telling the stories of why things have happened, right? And the origins and how that goes back is a classic conversation starter in the Middle East, where very easily people will tell you this is how it was, this is how we do things, this is where the origins are, without and that's a good way of engaging. And humor is a big part of the Middle Eastern culture. I think that's another key element for people to kind of keep in mind is if someone's joking around with you, it's not in an insulting way. That's how it is. Playing pranks, or they don't do that in a business context, but just having a humor and jokes, etc., is very common in the Middle Eastern way. Right? Like banter is the term I would use between people, even in business. Elements, right?
People laugh a lot in those big executive meetings for some reason. So,
which is very different to maybe in a non-Middle Eastern context, where you may feel that it's not being taken seriously or it's insulting. It's not just mad banter of building that relationship, as it were, like similar to the Guangxi in mainland China.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. Actually, this has been a great conversation. We've touched on so many points, but I think the key element of innovation and the changes and your entrepreneurship journey has been very fascinating. I look forward to working closer together as we build towards that. It's been very helpful for us for our internship program with the CUHK in terms of getting us to very solid interns and hopefully a few more in the future. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for more innovative conversations around Web3, Fintech, and the startup world from Asia. Thank you once again, Tayseer, for joining us on Finstep Asia Web Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Stay tuned. click like, subscribe, and follow us for more in the future.